Well, the teacher strike now into its third week, with the potential for the province to legislate them back to work seeming more likely. Gil McGowan is the president of the Alberta Federation of Labour, which represents tens of thousands of unionized workers across the province. Gil, I'm sure you're following this very closely. We do appreciate your time this morning. And I guess let's just start with your sense of the likelihood of legislating the teachers back to work, whether you think that'll happen.
Well, good morning, Jefferson. I think it's clear that the government has every intention to introduce back to work legislation. The Premier has said it. The Education Minister has said it. For us, it's just a question of what that legislation is going to look like and how quickly it will be passed. It'll probably be tabled on Monday, the 27th. By using closure, the government probably can ram it through by the end of the day on Tuesday. So for us, the big question is what is that legislation going to look like?
And Gil, what other options are there that the province has chosen not to exercise in this dispute?
Well, that's a really important question, Jefferson, because if the government really was focused on just getting kids back into the classroom, they had tools at their disposal that they chose not to use. So in the existing labor code, we have two options, one called a disputes inquiry board, the other called a public emergency tribunal. These are both existing provisions that the government could have used to end the strike. In the case of the DIB, it would have been sent back to mediation, which would have resulted in a mediator recommendation that the teachers could have voted on. In the case of a public emergency tribunal, it would have gone to an arbitrator to make a final decision. But the fact that they've chosen not to use either of those, which could have happened even without the legislature in session, suggests that the government has something else in mind. And frankly, that's what we in the broader labor movement are concerned about.
Yeah, and so let's talk about potential actions by the broader labor movement. We are hearing rumblings of expanded labor action if teachers are forced back. What would that look like, and what are the chances of that happening?
Well, the big issue for us is the use of the so-called notwithstanding clause. That's Section 33 of the Constitution that allows provincial governments and the federal government, if they so choose, to essentially override some of the basic democratic protections that are included in the Constitution, including things like freedom of expression, freedom of association. I think it's important for your viewers to understand that the Supreme Court has ruled that strikes and collective bargaining are both constitutionally protected rights as extensions of the right, the freedom of association. So, what the courts have said is that if you want to pass constitutional muster, a government has to actually allow workers to strike. It has to allow workers to engage in collective bargaining, and that they can't just use their legislative power to impose a contract without negotiation. That breaks the Constitution. And so what we're worried about is that the government here in Alberta is going to invoke the notwithstanding clause, strip these workers of their rights, and if they do that, then this becomes about much more than just the teachers. Obviously, the teachers have very legitimate grievances. They have wages that haven't kept up with inflation. They're concerned about classroom sizes that are getting completely unmanageable, especially in the big urban areas like Edmonton and Calgary. But if the government uses this cudgel, the notwithstanding clause, then what's to stop them from pressing that notwithstanding clause button the next time a group of workers are in tough negotiations with the government? So, and we actually have a number of very large groups of workers in the queue right now. So the Health Sciences Association, representing 30,000 healthcare workers, the Alberta Union of Provincial Employees, representing about 40,000 healthcare workers. They're both in negotiations. Things are not going well, and they're close to taking strike votes. So that's why the rest of the labor movement is paying attention. If the government, and most governments don't use this, it's very rarely used. If the government chooses to use the notwithstanding clause, it will be a choice for escalation, and this will be much bigger than the teachers and the labor movement. In order to defend our workplace rights, we will have to respond in kind.
Okay, we'll continue to follow it. Obviously, within the next week or so, we'll know. Gil, thank you so much for taking time for us. Very much appreciate it. That is Gil McGowan, president of the Alberta Federation of Labour.